Pauline, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Tell me about your business. Tell me where you are located. Give me your website address, all your social media accounts, stuff, and everything.
Wow, that's a lot to ask. Thanks, Shane. I am located in Sacramento, California, and I've lived here for a number of years, but that's neither here nor there. My website is www.paulinehaynes.com. And it actually takes you to my website, as I'm a life coach. And so I do both of those in sync with each other. And what was the other part of the question?
Yeah, no,
I have a short.
You're an officiant, right? And a life coach, correct?
Absolutely. Yes.
So tell me, what made you decide to become an officiant, get into life coaching, that sort of thing?
Actually, I've been a life coach longer than I've been an officiant, and I kind of became an accidental officiant, if you like. And a very dear friend of mine had been married, and she went through a divorce. And when she started dating someone else, he said to her that if ever we get married, I want Pauline to be our officiant. And I thought, well, that's really nice of him. And fast forward 7 years later, they decided to get married. And she said to him, well, do you have a plan B if Pauline can't do it? He says, there's no plan B. And in a sense, it was really very flattering, because there's something about who I am that they really wanted, and they like my personality, they like who I am, how I go about life, and they really wanted to have that in their wedding. And so the first wedding I ever did was theirs, and it happened at 2:45 a.m.
Wow.
And so he was very particular about things taking place at a certain time. And when I was doing the ceremony, it was in their backyard, and they're very, very small wedding, beautiful wedding. And I had to pronounce them husband and wife at a very particular time. And so I'm looking out to one of the guests who was telling me not yet, so I had to just like a concertina, make things last as long as I could.
Yeah.
But then it was really, really beautiful. And I realized that the experience I had from that was great. And more importantly, they appreciated and they respected the way that I handled it, being my first wedding. And it just happened from there. And mostly I get people who've known me or who've known of what I do. And that's how I get most of my clients. And so in a sense, I'm pretty selective about who I work with, just like I expect the people who come to me to be selective. Mm-hmm. It's one of the reasons that quite often the first thing that people ask is, how much do you charge?
Yeah.
And I say, what's more important than what I charge is, am I the right person for you to have officiating this absolutely magically perfect day of your life? Mm-hmm. And so I have a conversation with people, but I never even begin to move forward until I've actually met with them. So typically I meet with a couple and I get a sense of who they are. And I go through a whole list of, it's almost like storytelling to me, because essentially what I do is I tell their stories. And sometimes when I'm at the wedding, they're surprised that some little thing that they told me got incorporated into the ceremony. Yeah. To me, that's what makes it fun, and it makes it exciting. And so there are no two ceremonies that's alike, because each couple is very, very unique. Yeah. And that's what I like to bring to what I do.
I agree. Well, it's interesting that you fell in love with that part of the business versus like just life coaching. Tell me about how, like, the life coaching piece. Was that, you said you've done that for most of your life coaching?
Well, actually not for most of my life. I've been life coaching since 2010, and I've been officiating since about 6 years ago. And I actually worked at a corporation for about 17 years. And one day I decided that, okay, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. So I went to work that day and I quit. And I didn't make any long-term plans. I didn't make any financial goals. I just decided that I couldn't possibly do that anymore. It's not what I recommend other people do, but it felt right for me.
Mhm.
And so one of the things I did in the interim is I'm a trained massage therapist, and so I do massage. I just people I know from my home. And I also ran an underground kitchen in that I love to cook, I love to entertain. And so what I would do is once a month, people would come to my home. I do a 5-course meal. They'd bring their own wine, and we would sit in my garden. They'd come at 7 o'clock, and sometimes at 1 o'clock in the morning, they're still there. And it wasn't like you're just going out to dinner. It
Right.
became an event. And the event was because I created it as that. And the people just kept saying, okay, when are you going to have the next one? When's the next one?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I decided that, I needed to do something else. I needed to recreate myself because I wasn't old enough at the time to retire. And so I sent out a survey to people who've known me. I'm very lucky that I've been in this area for over 40 years. And so I have a real tight community. And I sent out a survey and I said, okay, what shall I do with the rest of my life? And it came back resoundingly that you should do what you've always done, be a coach. And the truth is, I had never heard of a life coach. I knew what a coach was, but not a life coach. And I thought, okay. I said, why? They said, well, you're the person that's always there to help anybody whenever somebody needs something. You're the go-to person. You're kind of like, in fact, somebody called me a Sherpa once, even though I've never been to the Himalayas. But they say that I'm the kind of person that I listen and I do what it is that's needed to be done, and I have an ability to put people at their ease. So essentially, that's how it was. And I started doing my research into life coaching. And there was a school in Southern California who happened to be starting a class the following weekend. And I called them and I said, well, I'd like to go. And they said, well, we have a space for 2 people. If you book by such and such a time, you're in. And so I spent my money. I booked my hotel and went down to Southern California. And I have never looked back.
Nice. So you just started
Yeah.
a whole new thing. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Yeah. Especially the
And I
dinner
think
thing, I think is interesting, right? So you were probably already coaching people when they would come over for dinner, right? Like we're talking about life stuff and just
right.
yeah.
I think that's why, in a sense, it becomes very natural to me. And I am not one of these high-powered coaches that, everybody needs a checklist or everybody wants a checklist. I am pretty much very much out of the box, and things happen with me very organically. Whatever I do, I like it to be organic because gardening is my metaphor for life. And, when I garden, I don't have nice, neat little rows. It's got to be like that. I love it the way that nature is. And nature is wild and colorful and beautiful and exciting. And it gives you this whole opportunity of just stepping into all of who you can be. And that's what I encourage people to be, whether they're officiant or whether they're life coach. It's about who are they being today. And I think that's what excites me about what I do. The
Yeah.
other thing is I decided that I never want to do a job for the sake of doing a job. I want to do what gets me excited, because the more excited I am, the more I can share that with the people that I'm working with. And
Well, the more it feels
that's
good
what
to get
personally.
up and go to work or not really work, but if you're doing
Right.
something you like to do, and it gets you excited, right? Then you're more apt to do more about it. You're more apt to learn more about it. You're more apt to be successful
Right.
at it. Um, you
Mm-hmm.
know, yeah, I mean, like for example, I mean, I love just looking at data and information and trying to make sense of it and trying to find patterns in it. And people will walk by my desk and look at it and go, "What the hell are you looking at?" And I've got just numbers all over my screen. My wife is, she'll come by and like, what are you doing? And I'm like just looking at data I found and go, "Oh, let me see what
Right.
kind of patterns I can find in this thing and if it means this." And I don't know. So I don't know. I get excited about it. So it's one of those things.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're
And
talking
data
about.
is important.
What's that?
Data is important. Data is very important.
Yeah.
But don't ask me to do data. I come from the, they talk about the left brain and the right brain, and my brain is not in the data sphere of it. I understand the importance of it, but what I get is, what is it that makes the human tick? And of course, I know that there's scientific ways that we can go about that. Studies have been done around how our brains work and what is it that gets us into that. So you go much deeper into that while I skim the surface. I'm the butterfly,
Got you.
At least I'm honest.
Yeah. So do you wrap in with your, like when people want you to be their officiant, do you wrap in some coaching exercises with them as a couple, or?
Only if I'm asked. And one of the things that when I have conversations with people, I am very real about who I am. So I don't, if I'm coaching and if I have to share something in my life that would enhance their lives, then I'm happy to do that. So I'm very, very open in what it is that I do. And there's one couple, I always meet with a couple, and there was one couple I was meeting with, and they had some unfinished business. And I just happened to be sitting there and I'm watching these two people, and I'm not a therapist, but I said, well, why don't you tell him what it is that you are feeling? And here was this kind of intervention. And for about 15 minutes, these two people were just having this really beautiful conversation, almost like a conversation they'd never had before. And they were both crying. And the beauty is that in the end, they just came together and they were just respecting and appreciating a different depth of each other. Mm-hmm. And I said, I guess that's why you guys want to get married, huh? And they laughed.
Nice.
But that it's those little things that I love about dealing with people.
Yeah.
Because we show our vulnerabilities and we show our strengths, and when we're open to something like that, it's magic.
What would you say as humans that we tend to probably not do the most about, with ourselves? Like, we're probably pretty bad on ourselves individually, right? So what would you say is the thing that we do pretty bad to ourselves as humans, like, mentally?
I think sometimes we second guess ourselves a lot, and sometimes we don't honor ourselves enough. By that, I mean we don't take enough care of ourselves, and we think about taking care of ourselves as an external exercise. But in fact, we have to be careful of the thoughts we have, where we go with the thoughts, the things we put into our bodies. And, I come from a place of gratitude. If I get up and I can be grateful that all the organs of my body is working, I can see, hear, touch, smell, and all the parts that I can't see, if they're functioning, then I think I'm doing great. And if I'm doing that, whatever else that I have to deal with externally, then it's almost like I have the ammunition, and I hate that word because it sounds so harsh, but it's like I have what it takes to get through today. And when we exist in our own selves, that's great. But how we exist in community is when we have to be outside dealing with other people. So unless and until we have internally what it takes to make us be whole, then it's harder to be that on the outside.
Do you think that translates into, I can see what you're saying for sure. Like, if we're not taking care of ourselves inwardly, then the things that we're not taking care of almost translate out into our community and how we act and what we do and things like that.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we forget that. We think that there's a little magic thing outside of ourselves. But everything, it always starts, it starts with self. And whatever it is, it's like when you get on an airplane, if there's going to be an accident, and touch wood, I've never been in an accident, but when the mask comes down, one of the first things you have to do is you have to make sure that you're taken care of. If you're a parent, and if you're not healthy, then whatever your children are needing, you're not going to be able to provide that. So it always comes back to self. And you know, there are people who are very religious, and I'm not religious. I come from a very spiritual perspective. And, you know, people always say you put the higher power of God or whatever you call it. And that's fine. If that works for someone, then that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
what would you say, so for couples looking for an officiant, what questions do you think they should be asking? What advice would you give them to go through the process of when they're looking for an officiant? You know, a lot of them like to hire like they have their friends do it, or, you know, someone they know that's very close to it. But let's say that they don't have that, but
Mhm.
they're needing to hire someone. What should they be thinking
Right.
about? What questions should they be asking?
I think they should be thinking about, how do I feel around this person? And one of the things I ask what they envision their day to be like. And like I said, I don't come from a religious perspective. And so I ask them what language is important for them to have included. And some people, if they want to have the word God used in it, whatever it is that they want to have used in it, I will incorporate that. If they don't, then I won't. And it's interesting. One couple I married, one was a Sikh and one was a Jehovah's Witness. And her family were not at the wedding, but his family were. And it was just this, it was really magical and so beautiful. And sometimes if I have the time, I meet with the couple afterwards. It's just kind of my way of thanking them. And I tell you that I do out of the box things. Sometimes I'll have dinner with them. And so at that particular wedding, I asked, how do you feel about your family not being at the wedding? And she said it was very hurtful to her. And I said, now that the wedding is over, how are you dealing with your family? And she said, no, it's fine. You know, they've accepted him and they've accepted her. And I said, what would you say to your father? And have you told him how you felt? And she said, no. And I said, well, what stopped you from saying that? She says, I don't know. And I said, you know, conversations are very important. And when you tell your truth, you might allow somebody else to see a part of you that they've never seen before. And it's not about how hurt I am or how hurt I've been, but this is who I am. And I want you to know this about me. Because maybe your father didn't know the depth of how hurtful it was for you on your special day to not have him be there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, those are the important caveats for me. And I think in anything we do in life, it's important for us to be able to speak our truth. And my truth is not your truth, because there's no one universal truth. What's true for me is not necessarily true for you. And when I can say my truth and you can hear it, then that's how a deeper relationship begins. So.
Yeah. Nice. Let's switch gears and talk about the business side a little bit. So as an officiant, what would you say has been working well for you over the past couple of years?
I think what works well for me is the human side of it, because most of the people that I get, I've been very lucky that I've seemed to get the top reviews from all the people. And it's not that I'm such a sharp businesswoman. I think it's because of the personal things that I put into it. And one of the things, like from a business perspective, and it also comes into the human perspective, is I go into details about the wedding in that I don't always wear a suit to be there. I don't always want to look kind of that stiff. But I go into the colors that they're using so that the way I'm dressed is complementing their colors. And I realize that little things like that makes a huge difference to people. And sometimes they're even surprised that I would even care that much about, you know, what colors are they wearing or would I do that. So the business side for me is not just about the ROI or how much money I'm making or how much I'm charging. To me, the business side is, what service have I given to this couple that I can make this day truly memorable? And that's what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah. Outside of like the things that are going on today with COVID, what would you say have been your biggest challenges over the past couple of years?
Um, like I said, I'm very out of the box, and I've had a lot of people wanting to inviting me to do weddings when they're incarcerated, and while it's not that I have a problem with that. I've just personally chosen not to perform weddings in a prison. And I know that there's some people it would be great for them. I think of this as a happy occasion, and for me, the surroundings are very important. So I've had a lot of people wanting to do that, and I've had people who are going into the military since COVID has started. They're going into the military, and they want to have a quick wedding, and that's been another issue. And sometimes they wanted me to go to almost Timbuktu. I'm sorry, I don't do a whole lot. You know what? I'd have to charge somebody to go to Timbuktu.
Yeah.
To me, it's not cost effective. And so I like to be within about 50 miles of where I am. And that feels comfortable for me. And if it's a challenge for some people, I will talk with them. And hopefully, when I've had a conversation with them, the person that they decide to use that's in their locale will they will get the information that they can ask the questions that they need to ask to make sure that it's the right person for them.
Yeah. I can see those as being challenges for sure. Would you? If you had to go back and tell yourself something 5 years ago, what would you go back and tell yourself?
Wow. What would I tell myself? Now that I'm this mature woman, I tell myself that, you're actually doing things in just the perfect right way. And 5 years ago, the things that I worried about, it's like, okay, I've got to have a website, I've got to do that, I've got to do that. I would simply say, just chill. Just do what it is that comes naturally.
Yeah.
And just don't take it all so seriously. We're talking about life, we're talking about people, we're talking about humanity. Are you coming from your heart, or are you coming just from your pocketbook? Not that one is better than the other. They're both important. But I would just say, just chill. You've got this.
Just chill a little, yeah. I've actually heard that a few times now. Like, just I would go back and say, all right, just relax, right? Just relax a little. It doesn't have to be so, yeah, for sure. The last question is, what's your best, or I would say most inspirational wedding story that you have?
The most inspirational. I did a wedding, and they did two ceremonies. They did the sand ceremony, because they both have two children. They both have a child each from previous marriages, and they also wanted to do jumping the broom. But when they were doing the sand ceremony, they had it in the containers they had was very, very tiny. And so getting the sand out was pretty problematic. And so I'm standing there, didn't have a pencil with me, and I had to be shaking this thing to get the sand out. And then when they did jump the broom, what was so beautiful, her shoes were high. And so she took her shoes off. We did a rehearsal, and she took her shoes off. And it was so touching and so beautiful that as she jumped the broom, her father came up and just picked the shoes up as he kissed her feet. And that, to me, it was just so magic. It was beautiful.
Wow.
And it was, that was very special.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm kind of a touchy-feely kind of person. So when I see things like that, those are magical moments, and they make everything so special. So
yeah, for them, for the family, for everybody, right? I mean, it's just for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Pauline, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Shane.
All
you
right.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.